There's a monumental, earth-shattering that happens all through your kids' growth, your many kids or one kid's evolving stages. So you're not taking stock. You simply can't, because this role is so enveloping.
All right, welcome back. This is Sheleana, Aiyana, and I am welcoming Dr. Shefali today. We're going to have a conversation about all sorts of things, including your new book, A Radical Awakening. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. So excited.
So your new book, A Radical Awakening, that one fairly fresh, right? Just came out a few months ago. Yeah, there it is. I left my copy at my house. I'm not at my house today. So yeah, I've just been checking it out and skimming it through the Kindle book. And I know your work originally from your work with families and conscious parenting. And I've always really appreciated that. So I'm curious if you can share a little bit about the transition from working on that family level into this more personal realm.
Well, as you expand as a writer or as a seeker, you kind of evolve as your writing evolves, and vice versa. Your writing evolves as you evolve. And so my daughter's 18 now, so I don't need to deal with a lot of the parenting issues as I used to. So I've written 4 books. One is co-authored, but 3 main books on parenting. And now I was coming into my own as a woman. And so it felt very organic and authentic to write a book on that awakening as a woman. So this book is more specifically for the soul of the evolving woman who is eager to radically awaken and empower herself as she has never done before.
Beautiful. So it was a little bit of an initiation for you then, having your kids grow up, and then did you feel like you had to find yourself again, or what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I think that, while you're always finding yourself again and again, when your kid goes to college, there is a definite, precipitous invitation once again to truly ask yourself if you've been living as authentically as possible. So I took the invitation to go deeper than I had done before, because when you are a mom, you get enveloped by that role. So now, with the freedom that that role provides once it's over, there's a different kind of calling and a different depth that you have the potential to access now that you're not distracted by that role so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges for people when they become parents, is that they feel like they've sort of dissolved into that one role, and there's all of these other sides of themselves that they've sort of relegated away. And so there is this process of sort of peeling back the layers and saying, well, who am I now? Because we do change, but we might not even know that because we haven't actually taken time to sit with ourselves in a long time.
Exactly. There's a monumental, earth-shattering that happens all through your kids' growth, your many kids or one kid's evolving stages. So you're not taking stock. You simply can't, because this role is so enveloping. Mm-hmm. So at the end of that era, you are truly left with a deep knowing sense of, maybe I don't fully know who I am because I've let that go for so long. So now you have an invitation like never before. So this is that book, but it's for young women too. It's for teenagers, an older teen for sure as well, a blossoming adult. It's really an accumulation of all my wisdom lessons and how I have offered my clients and myself to navigate the terrain of growth.
Mm-hmm. So when do you think people will usually come to this work? I know in my field, I often find that people come when they're in a crisis, or when they're, at rock bottom in some way, there's breakup or a divorce. In your experience, when do people find themselves most open to your work, like to this book, for example?
Yeah, only through pain. Unfortunately, I call it the portal to awakening, because until our pain of the old ways of being aren't severe enough, that pain hasn't shattered us enough, we will stay in the old masks, in the old patterns. So when those old ways dissolve, then you're going to be open to new ways. But until that deep acute pain, which means your ego is dissolving, you will not be open. You'll find a way to trick yourself to stay the same way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's unfortunate that it works like that. But on the other hand, I think I see it a little bit as life school. We go through these really intense initiations, and if we choose to take the turn toward ourselves, then we actually end up being more wise, more compassionate, more loving, right? Which is kind of the point. But if we turn away from it, like you say, and go toward, the ego path, then we might just become bitter and see the world from that lens. So what would you say for women who are sort of on that precipice right now, signs that they're being asked to go inward?
Yeah, what a great question. So you're right. When we go through pain, there's an opportunity to either get more calcified and rigid in the old ways, or now we have an opportunity to move into a different iteration of yourself. So women who aren't yet at that breaking point but want to make a change need to examine, just very, very compassionately, what is working for them and what isn't. Where are the areas where they're hitting up against uh, an anxiety wall or an anger wall or a stagnancy wall? But if they're not aware even at that level, then I would say, pay attention to the signs from relationships. Where are the relationships constantly creating chaos or unfulfillment? And if even that is unavailable for access to awareness, then you just wait it out a little bit and just continue on. Maybe there isn't something big that needs to change. But typically when you turn to areas of stress or anxiety or anger, you will find some discontent. You will find some place where there is room for growth, and you can begin there. Call a coach, a best friend. Just start the articulation that this is bothering me, this is troubling me, this is causing me anxiety. It doesn't have to be solved, but you can raise it into your awareness. But that is the first step, is awareness. Write it down. Say, I'm having anxiety right now. It shows up in my chest, it shows up in my jaw. I find myself overthinking. Begin to talk to your anxiety. What are you trying to tell me? How can I serve you better? What am I not paying attention to? Not to look for answers, but just to activate a new awareness, new energy around the inner world. And that's the pivotal, vital first step: new energy around your inner world. Learning to turn inward every single day, and then processing that step by step, not looking for answers, not looking to change, just awareness. I think people get overwhelmed by this work because they think, if I look within and there's something wrong, if I can't change it, it's no point. But the point is not to fix. The point is to sit with it for a while and become aware of it and befriend it.
Yeah, it's the process of self-acceptance. So rather than seeing something as bad and we need to relegate it to the basement of our minds and let it fester in our bodies, we can just accept it, and by giving it less power, it actually changes form entirely. It's usually those things that we hold on to resistance in our bodies, that they are the ones that have the most power to unconsciously drive us. And I think that's the key point that you mentioned, which is that aspect of trying to fix it or change it rather than just allowing it.
But it's so uncomfortable, right? I mean, that's why it's easier to bury it, because it's easier to eat it away, run it away, watch movies it away, or get angry away, or to just run in your covers, sleep all day away. But that is because we're not used to sitting with the not so pleasant parts of life. Because when we were children as well, when we cried too much or had big feelings, our parents shooed us away, or mollified us, gave us something to eat, because they were not aware how to handle emotional feelings in an articulate, coherent way. So we either over intellectualized or over analyzed or over distracted ourselves. Big feelings are so scary because we've been trained to be happy all the time. But we can't be happy all the time. There's no such thing. So when we learn to accept, okay, now we're in a little bit of a slump, and now we're in a little bit of uncertainty, now we're in a little bit of doubt, we accept that these are elements of life that are profoundly vital and they cannot be done away with because we want happiness. Happiness comes from merging into the isness rather than wanting the isness to change. That's just the first step of acceptance.
Love that. Beautifully said. And I feel that our work is very parallel in that way, because I do a lot of work around just really talking to our bodies and talking to that inner messenger and seeing, what medicine is there for us in these deeper experiences, what wisdom is trying to come through us. And that's a little reframe that I like to offer when we're talking about, exploring our internal landscape is, that's your wisdom wanting to come through, right? And it's not outside of you, it's inside of you. So I really love that you're emphasizing that. And I think pretty much everybody could benefit from going through that process, because you're right. In childhood, for most of us, that was not welcome, right? There was this like, be on your best behavior, do what you're told. If you don't behave that way, we're going to put you away until you, change how you show up. And that's sort of how we develop these masks, right? And I'd like you to talk about that, because I was reading a little bit of your book on my Kindle this morning to just kind of get a refresh. And I noticed that you were mentioning masks quite early on there as well. And I think that concept is good for us all to sort of take note of when we're, interacting in life.
Right. So I'm just opening it up. We're talking about one of my chapters in my book, A Radical Awakening. So when we're young and we find ourselves pissing our parents off, or they are neglecting us or negating us, we quickly put on a mask to get their attention. We become people pleasers, or the perfect little good girl, or a comedian, all in the effort to get our inner needs met of being seen, being understood, and being validated. So in this book, I talk about the egoic masks that allow us to survive the untenable parts of childhood and allow us to get what we didn't get naturally. But what happens when we wear these masks over and over again is that our authentic self erodes. And we learn then to believe that the masks are our authentic self, but they're not. And the masks, because they're quote unquote fake, they will fall apart, and then you won't know how to rely on anything else because you thought that was you. But that's not you. That was just an aspect of you that you used to get love and worth from the outside. We never developed then an authentic way of receiving the love and worth. So in this book, I talk about the givers, the takers, and the controllers as some of the main masks that women wear, such as being a savior or a victim or a martyr or a perfectionist or people pleaser or bleeding empath. These are masks that women typically wear because we've been trained to manage ourselves by putting on this idea of the giver in some way. And even when we're controllers, we're still trying to manage our validation from the outside world. So all our masks are to get validation from the outside world. What happens because of this wearing of the masks is that we have not found an internal way of giving ourselves validation. And that's what happens then, is that life pushes us to test how valid are we on our own without that external source. And when we don't have an inner source of validation, that's the pain of relationships. It's not the real pain, it's the pain of not having a self that's connected. But that's the invitation. Connect to yourself. But it's a very hard process because all this time we thought that the false self was the true self. So, but this is why you need somebody like yourself or me or another coach to guide people through this process of inner awakening.
Yeah, I love what you said too about the authentic self, because really how we're operating in society right now is we're constructing our entire lives and our purpose and everything around us around these masks. And so that's why we see people who they start to have what they feel is an awakening, And then their first instinct is to just burn their life to the ground because, well, everything around me is just created by this inauthentic self. So then the solution is to just burn it all down. And that can be equally as dangerous because sometimes the work is actually going right in to the center of the fire and letting what you've built all around you sort of reconfigure and restructure and transform rather than just, you know, wiping it out. And we have this disposable culture, right? Especially, you know, in relationship, we're like, well, you know, I married this person from my inauthentic self. So, you know, I'm just going to get rid of it and that will make my problems go away. Then I'll be authentic. But it doesn't work like that either, does it?
Well, it's not a rapid, quick change of shoes. And again, searching for authenticity can also be another fakery, right? Another chicanery that we engage in because we want to run away from the pain. So bypassing pain to look for authenticity is not the way either. So being in the pain of the fire till you genuinely can move consciously. And when you move in that way, the wreckage is less and it's less forced. And when you do have to move past, it kind of feels effortless because consciousness is leading you, not reactivity, not you're bolting from the fear. So typically you have to sit in it, but it is very painful in a relationship, especially when you're being asked to enter the fire and you don't feel equipped and you don't feel ready. And that's why getting the help of a coach or a therapist is so vital.
Yeah, agreed. And do you have a section in your book all on this process of sitting in the fire and knowing what action to take? Because I think, like I said, a lot of people, they hit this point where they think they're waking up and their instinct is to just get rid of anything that could disturb their awakening process. But there is a lot of medicine sometimes in just leaning into what's right in front of us.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So in the book, the whole book is laid out as a process, actually.
Nice.
The first part is the realization that we've been asleep. That's the whole first part. The second part is recognizing our masks and deconstructing our childhood patterns. Part 3 is exploring our sexuality. Part 4 is cracking the matrix of our belief systems, and part 5 is awakening. So it's really a whole. As you read the book, you begin to touch upon all aspects of yourself, and slowly shed your skin. And hopefully, you come out at the end of the book with a new idea or a new inkling of a possibility.
Beautiful. Let's talk about sexuality for a moment. Tell me something good about that.
Well, it's all good. The sad thing, the tragedy is that we have been told it's bad. And we therefore limit our human experience because we think our bodies and pleasure are a bad thing. And in doing that, we put a dampener and a dimmer on intimacy with others and ourselves. So first, is the deconstruction of the idea that it's bad. Second, self-pleasure is so beautiful, and honoring your own body and celebrating your own body. And then seeing sexuality as a wonderful bridge to the other. And it is a truly non-verbal, non-material, energetic transmission of sexual chemistry between yourself and somebody else that can be so potent and beautiful to explore and not get it mixed up with morality and marriage and judicial and all rules and permutations.
Yeah, that can be a real challenge when we don't even realize that we're carrying. Even people who weren't raised religiously, I find, are often carrying these old rooted beliefs that there's something to be ashamed of in terms of sharing your pleasure or being sexual. And I think that can get really confusing. At the same time, there's also this tendency to not see the energetic exchange that you're talking about, right? Where we just treat it as like it's just a body, right? But there's an energy body, there's this like spiritual exchange that's happening as well. Do you talk about that with women sometimes when they're trying to figure out, how to interact when they're dating or rekindling new relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So we objectify ourselves so much,
Mhm.
even though culture objectifies us, we objectify ourselves and trap ourselves in our physical form, and then we're not able to see it as a transmission of energy and enjoy that, because we think we're too fat, or we think we're too wrinkled, or so we get trapped in our own insecurities of form, and we aren't able to transcend to energy. But yeah, it's mainly this book is about how women can step into their autonomy and their communality, their sisterhood, and how when we understand that we're here to support each other, what a powerful vortex of inspiration and emotional resource that can be. But when we pivot ourselves as against each other, then we dim our light and we shrink into, our singular cocoons, and we live in a threatened way.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that comes up a lot in my groups when I work with women too, is feeling like we can own our sexuality and not have to use it as some sort of transaction. And then also knowing that we do that with our emotions too, right? Because as you talk about with this inauthentic self, we sort of use whatever masks that we have to get what we want transactionally. And then in the end, we're disappointed because there's not a foundation of trust and acceptance in our relationships because we've never actually shown up. And so there is this process of having to take ownership for that rather than blaming the external world. And I remember reading in the intro of your book where you said, this isn't going to be an easy ride, something like that. It's not the exact words, but you were like, hey, this is going to be confronting and there's going to be triggers in here. And I've designed it this way. So that you can actually take a good look within. And that process is really, really tough. That's why most people don't do this work, right? Because who wants to feel like crap about all of the things that we've done to sabotage our own lives? But let's talk about that for a moment, why you designed it that way, what it actually means to lean into a trigger, and how that can actually be so fruitful for us in the end.
Yeah, it is the only way to free ourselves of the external dependencies we have. And the way is to get triggered, no problem. We're always going to get triggered, but then to view it as because of an internal expectation, an internal need, an internal desire. So as long as we, after getting triggered, can come back to a place of, okay, it was because of my expectation, even if the person led you to that expectation, said, hey, I will be there at 4 o'clock. And once again, they weren't there at 4 o'clock. Then you have to own that part of you that wanted to believe. And it's really hard, but that's how you deal with the trigger. You get triggered, you see the trigger, you see the ugly, quote unquote ugly, but then you return to a place of, okay, what within me needed this, wanted it, desired it, and is crushed because it isn't the way I thought it should be. Most of our triggers are because expectation didn't meet reality. And so we have to go within and we have to claim ownership of buying into that expectation, even if the other person told us they would. We have to own the human part of our interaction and go, but I was a willing co-conspirator of that relationship. And I chose to believe. I chose to expect. I chose it. That co-creation results in the ultimate autonomy and freedom from our dependency on the other and waiting around for the other to grow or learn or change so that we can get our expectations met.
You're speaking my language. And also the waiting for the apology, right? Or the waiting for them to, own their part. And I hear this a lot from women. They say, well, I can't move forward because they won't acknowledge that they've hurt me, or they won't acknowledge what they've done. And that's such a prison in itself, isn't it? Because you can be waiting for your entire life and people will not take accountability for their role. And that's why, in your work, when you're talking about taking accountability as a co-conspirator, and when you said it will free you to stop waiting around, that's the key point, right? Because when people hear the accountability piece, or we chose it, they hear, well, then I should just accept what's happening and I should just not feel upset about it. But that's not actually what you're saying. What you're saying is that the more freedom you have to be grounded and centered in your own body, and at home in your own emotions, and you're not letting someone else dictate your behavior, it'll be actually easy for you to say, you know what, actually, this isn't working for me anymore, or this boundary is going to be firm now, right? It's when we're actually being pulled by other people's reactions constantly that we actually aren't able to do those things.
Yes. So learning that, like you said, we are our own home to our own emotions. We are our own solution to our own angst. We are our own anchor in times of trouble. We are our own safe space in times of chaos. And releasing the other from that power, letting them go on their path and relinquishing them of that desire that you have, that they be your safe space. Then you can choose to decide if this works for you or not. But you're not going to do it if, when, then they are what you want. You're not going to do it only conditionally. You're going to do it for yourself and then decide if this still works for you or not. So that is the place we have to go to. And really, what we're talking about is self-worth, self-fortitude, self-trust, self-honoring. And that is ultimately what we are being asked to cultivate every turn of every relationship and every moment of chaos in our lives. We're asked to go there. How much do you trust yourself? How much are you there for yourself? How much do you honor yourself? And if the answer is, I don't know, well, then that's a problem. If the answer is not too much, if only they know. So you have to be your self-resounding echo of honor, worth, and celebration. And then you can decide what you want to do with the other person. The other person is really just the icing on the cake.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bit of a process, because when we are waiting for that other person, or we're constantly letting them dictate our behavior, then we're never actually doing the work, because doing the work is learning how to embody our truth, our core values, what we expect out of relationships. That's for us to embody. And it actually gets easier for the other relationships around us to fall away naturally when we're in that energetic frequency. Right? The reason that our relationship stays stuck is because we're actually engaging at that frequency of stuckness. Like, we're feeding it, and we're constantly saying, well, I said this because you said that, or I reacted this way because you did that, instead of having those opportunities to really stay centered and see it as sort of a test from spirit or God or source, whatever you want to call it. How are you going to show up when your back is against the wall? Right? That's your test. It's not about them. And so that can be the missing piece, I think, for a lot of us when we're on this journey, is really getting that. Like, these moments where you are wanting to blame or lash out, that's actually your moment to shine and really to show up. So I'm really excited to share your book with more people, because I think this is going to be very liberating and really enlightening for a lot of people. So thank you for writing it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Normally I would have read your whole book by the time I did an interview, but because I've been deep in my own bookland manuscript, I haven't been able to. But it sounds like we're sort of speaking the same language here. So I'm really excited to go through it more and put it on my book list recommendations on Rising Woman and get it into the hands of more people. I know your work has reached so many already, and I'm really excited to see where this new rendition goes, where this new version of your work goes, because like you said, it's been a bit of an initiation.
Yes, yes. Oh, I'm so grateful. Let me just show the book to people so they can see what book we're talking about.
And we'll put the link to your website and to the book in the show notes so they can access it and get the book.
I love it. Thank you. We're both sitting on the floors of our home and office spaces. So it's such a pleasure. Thank you for sharing my work.
Yeah, thank you.